if you're looking at 1,000 years of history or even 500, the same mistakes, the same issues that we see today have already occurred in one form or the other. So you look at those and you learn from them and you don't make those mistakes. If you don't have that perspective, if you don't study history, you're bound to make the same mistakes over and over again that people have made for thousands of years. And we live in, those of us in the Western world are fortunate to be in a democratic society. That's really kind of rare. They tried it in Greece. They maybe tried it in Rome. It didn't work. So we're living now in the last, say, 300, 200 years in kind of a golden age, and we don't even know it.
Well, it's so nice to get connected with you. And you have such an interesting story. You're doing amazing things with your literary work. So I'm really excited for this one.
Lawrence, it's a great honor to be here, and I'm really glad that we connected.
So the first thing about your bio is you have such an interesting background. You're a fifth generation from a pioneer ranching family. And I admit I'm incredibly ignorant on the ranching lifestyle until I watched the show Yellowstone. And it's an incredible show. I really enjoyed the show from a philosophical perspective. You have the Native Americans that are upset with the ranchers because they were there first. And then the ranchers are upset with the people coming in, the developers trying to develop it and modernize it. And so you have the interplay between the three groups. I just think it's so fascinating. And I never really appreciated the ranching lifestyle until I watched that show. And my God, what a life ranching is. It's just incredible.
Well, Yellowstone's a little bit, probably more Hollywood.
Yeah, of course.
But with my family, just summary, my background is predominantly Scots-Irish. So those folks would come from Scotland and then to Northern Ireland and then always kind of pushing the frontier. And when they came to the United States in early 1700s, that's kind of the way, I'm talking just the Glass family worked, just kept pushing frontiers and going west. Everybody was always going west. So the ranching began after the Civil War. My family was in Central Texas. And of course, post-Civil War, everybody was poor, war veterans. The state was offering relatively cheap land out west. Well, the problem out west in the Midland area is that there's no water. This is in 1880. And there's still some Comanches around. So they're not completely gone. And it's a very, very just hard lifestyle, risk-taking lifestyle, kind of gambling to go someplace that other folks would be, why are you doing that? That's crazy. It's comfortable where we are. So always kind of pushing the envelope and pushing the edge. There's one just short anecdote of my great-grandfather. Around 1880, he had just moved to Midland, and it's flat. There's nothing there. If you've ever been there, you're going, there's just not a lot. He got lost in a snowstorm, a blizzard with his horse. The horse was trying to take him one way. He was trying to go another. He was lost. He finally let the horse make the decision for them, and the horse got him back to his sod hut. He had it basically saved his life. So that winter, he and the horse shared the same quarters. So, and I think that horse had a great life for the rest of his life. But it's fascinating. It's fascinating to read about and something I'm pretty proud of.
And not just, it gives you a lot of gratitude for what we have here. And I think too many people forget how hard won the life we have and the freedoms we have. It wasn't easy for the people that first came here and that paved the way for us today. And I think it's easy to get lost in the distractions without having gratitude for what we have.
Exactly. That's why history is so important. That's why I'm such a fan of history like yourself, is that it teaches us. And so that we're able to sit here on this Zoom and have the freedom to do that with all the comforts that we have in our, air conditioned or heated homes, that was bought by men and women. Frankly, I feel in a lot of ways stronger than we are because we lead such a comfortable lifestyle. So part of my goal in life is to talk about those people and to honor them and to give them the respect and remembrance that they need.
Right.
And deserve.
So Doyle, how did you, I see your background, you were the assistant district for the district attorney in Texas. And I'm assuming now you're a full-time author. Is that right?
That's correct. I was a criminal prosecutor here in Texas, an assistant DA, late 1990s. And then I lived in Kentucky for 20 years, and I was an assistant attorney general there in all roles of a criminal prosecutor. So going after the bad guys, jury trials, rewarding in one sense, not rewarding in the sense that those who truly deserved to go behind bars for a long time necessarily didn't. But it was an excellent career to kind of safeguard citizens like ourselves. And then went through some life changes and was an artist, a sculptor. I have two monuments that I'm very proud of. Also in the same vein, the Kentucky Medal of Honor Memorial and the Texas Medal of Honor Memorial, which are both bronze statues of individuals who earned the Medal of Honor, one for Kentucky, one for Texas, and sculpted those, did that for about 10 years after my time as a prosecutor. And from that, I saw all of these stories, all of these of heroism, gallantry, and realized if we don't preserve these stories, we're not going to have them because they're not written down. And the people that can tell us their stories are passing. Mm. So I pivoted from art and went into writing. And that's the two books on the Vietnam War that I wrote, Lions of Medina and Swift Sword, are a product of that.
That's incredible. So yeah, when you were a prosecutor, like it's just so interesting because I feel like people are either artistic or not artistic, and you've done both. You've been high up in one field, and then you completely pivoted to this artistic lifestyle. You did the monuments. Now you're a full-time author. Is it hard for you to, like, there's two different types of people that write. There's the ones that feel like they're getting called by a muse, and it's almost like coming through them, and they just have to get it down on paper. And there's the other ones that are just disciplined. It's hard work. I get up at this time. I'm going to write for 2 hours a day or X amount of words a day. Which writer are you?
Well, both. And to be successful in anything, I think you have in a creative lifestyle. That's a great question. You have to have both. I started the sculpting on the weekends when I was a prosecutor as kind of an outlet from the law. Then when I pivoted and did that, I also painted, and then writing. There are certain elements in all creative endeavors, music, writing, art, that are similar, at least what I found, with how the brain works. But the other element is that you've got to put in the hard work. You've got to put in the time. You have to take one step forward, 2 steps back. You have to be disciplined. This is for me. To write any book, create any piece of art, anything creative, I have to have the creative process, make mistakes, go where that leads me, but it has to be disciplined. I can't wait around to be struck by lightning and then produce something. For me, that's not going to work. I have to have a work day, has to be disciplined. And if it's not, for me, there won't be any product at the end of the day.
Right. I think that's something that I notice. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 24. And I've been around a lot of, first it was in finance, then it was in sport, then it was in real estate now. And I noticed with a lot of my friends in real estate, if they have things that have to be done urgently, they get them done. And if they don't, they really struggle with the lack of structure that other people get in the more 9-to-5 jobs where they're kind of forced to be there. So when they're there, they're going to work. I think the self-imposed discipline to do what you've got to do when you don't have a deadline is what people struggle with the most. So I'm so glad you said that. That it doesn't matter how creative you are, you still have to have the discipline to get to the finish line.
That's a great point, Lawrence. When I left the law and the very disciplined work structure that you're talking about, I was struck by two things. One, I didn't have a social outlet anymore, going down to somebody's office and talking about the game. So I was like, where are the people? And then second, how do I prioritize my day here? I have so many things to do. What comes first? What comes second? And then, I just kind of screwed off in the afternoon and got nothing done. Well, okay, where is that taking me? That's doing this. So I personally developed my own system. My wife laughs at me because she could never do it. but I give myself my own personal credits. It's a credit system of accomplishing smaller goals in the day. What it is, it's a self-imposed structure that I adhere to by giving myself a full credit day or a half credit day. And at the end of the day, did I reach the top level for that day, or did I slip and not reach it? So I had to learn quickly how to prioritize and then to kind of superimpose my own discipline structure, because nobody else was going to do it. I don't have a boss breathing down my neck. I don't have a timesheet to fill out. I don't have a product that has a deadline. It's all on me. And that can be dangerous. You could end up doing a lot of different things and not realizing any of your goals because you're not focused or disciplined.
When you were talking, you just reminded me of when I was in martial arts and competing. I would try to, there was this balance between, I had my weekly schedule, but there'd be some days where I'm just a little, I'm not sick, but I'm just a little run down. My energy levels are lower. So I would try and take it a bit easier those days. And then the days I felt good, I'd go all out. And it was such a fine balance, because if you don't trust yourself, you're going to overtrain on the days you're low energy, then you're going to get sick or injured and you're going to be out for a week or two. So it was that fine balance. And when you were talking, I was just thinking, it must be the same. I've read a book on real estate, and I've got 2 more books that I'm working on, and I'm trying to find the time to squeeze in to get work, to decide which one to focus on first. But the idea is, some days my mind is just filled with ideas, and I just can't wait to get them on paper quick enough before I forget them. And other days it is like pulling blood from a rock. It's just so sluggish and hard to get the ideas out. My brain is sluggish. My idea flow is weak. How do you juggle those days? Because you're not a machine, we're human. So you can have the discipline to say, I want to write X amount of times a week or a day. But the days where the ideas are just not flowing, or you feel like it's really like pulling teeth, it's not easy. Do you give yourself a bit of grace? And then the days you feel great, do you just do a little bit more? Or how does the creative process work?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love your martial arts analogy. I also study jiujitsu, and I'm 62, so I'm old, and I have a hip replacement surgery next Tuesday. So clearly I'm not doing jiujitsu right now. My daughter came up with the idea, well, why don't you study mentally jiujitsu, your notes from class, book, and just keep it in your head until you physically can get back. And I thought, that's exactly right. I mean, I can't physically do it, but I can at least mentally keep it fresh and learn. So my point is, you have to pivot. On those days when I've had great ideas, or I'm in the shower and things are just, oh, okay, I'm on. I have a mantra that I start with every morning, and there'll be a space in there for ideas. And I'll write that idea down. I can't get to it now. I may not get to it in 2 weeks, but when it's on that mantra and I scroll down and I see it, I'm going, okay, all right, that was 2 weeks ago. It's still here. It hasn't disappeared. When do I need to make some time to follow up with that? Or my point is, it kind of lives. And if it's important enough, it's like your book on your real estate. You're like, okay, I need to do that. I've got some ideas. For me, it's on that mantra. It'll live there until I'm in a kind of a space to kind of deal with it. And that's one of the kind of tricks that I have to keep something alive and fresh and moving forward. Does that make some sense?
100%. Yeah. I mean, congratulations on jiu-jitsu. I actually teach jiu-jitsu. I've been doing it 23 years or something. So I've been doing jiu-jitsu a long time. I only teach 1 class a week for my instructor, but it's such a wonderful art, and it's so difficult. And the older I get, the more I appreciate people like you that are still training as you get older. When I was 25, I didn't even think about it because I was young and dumb. And now I'm older. I look at the 25-year-old students and I laugh. I think, if only they knew how easy it is now compared to whenever they are. Your joints hurt and you're stiff and you're tired. So I give you a lot of credit. And what you said is so interesting about learning. One of the top instructors, he said, when you're injured, if you just go there and your mind is in the game, as soon as you recover, you'll almost lose no training time. And he said, high level competing, it's people that make quicker mental decisions. So people focus so much on the physical, but he's all about the mental and the synapses and the things being quick in your mind. So you could be quicker than the opponent in execution. So it's less trying to get explosive physically and more being sharp mentally. I thought that was so interesting. So you're definitely doing the right thing by still mentally being involved.
Well, and from a creative or entrepreneurial mindset, I love jujitsu because it not only does it synergize your body and your mind, but it's difficult. You have to learn. It's not easy. And guess what? Who you're up against has a vote, and their vote might put you in the wrong place, and you're choked out. What I've done with that, and I was really encouraged to hear what you said, because I'll be out until March before I could probably get back to train. But I've split 20 minutes for my specific jiu-jitsu notes, 20 minutes for Jiu-Jitsu University, which is just a tome of basics, and then 20 minutes visualization where I close my eyes, I put myself in the situation, grappling with you or whoever. What is this person doing? How am I going to react? I can't go refer to my notes. I can't ask the instructor, but I can at least go to a mind gym, think, and it works. And it'll be some time before my body catches up, but at least I'll have those synapses firing. So my point, from an entrepreneurial or a creative standpoint, something like jiu-jitsu is awesome because it keeps you sharp. It keeps your synapses flowing. I'm 62. I'm not a young chicken. The brain has to keep firing. And if you're in a dynamic situation, what better way for that to happen? And I think it really works for all careers. I think it's a big kind of cross-training benefit for a creative life or an entrepreneurial life.
I couldn't agree more. And I love what you said think about life for your ancestors, how hard it was and how easy. I think the problem with most people is that their body is underused and their brain is overstimulated. So if you can do something that is physically difficult, I think it's going to make you much more mentally at peace and much happier. So kudos to you. And hopefully I'm doing still doing jiu-jitsu in my 60s and 70s. So that's really awesome. Well, which school do you go to in Dallas?
It's called Gracie One Academy here in Dallas. And we had some great instructors. We've had Hoyler, Gracie, Hoyce is coming in February, some of the others, and it's just great. I mean, and I'm nothing but a blue belt, and I'm very proud of my 4 stripes. And someday I'll be a purple. I might be 70. That's okay. That's all right. I'm out here at least doing it, and I'm learning. Exactly. That's another thing, learning, always learning something new and difficult. That's another way to be more like our ancestors. You brought up a great point. We're in a very much a consumer society, and it's not just the good things, food, cars, or whatever. We consume media, we consume news. And when you're a consumer and you're predominantly a consumer, you're just there. You're not proactive. You're not dynamic. You're not on the other side of the coin, producing, achieving. You're just receiving. And our ancestors didn't have that luxury. It was either do it or die. So we have to kind of force ourselves out of this kind of comfortable consumer bubble and move forward in life in all ways. Hopefully that makes some sense.
No, 100%. And Doyle, I'll tell you something I've realized just the last few years about the importance of history. So when I was young, in England, the school system is a bit different. When you're a year out from graduating high school, you have to pick one subject to do for your degree. So for me, it was between mathematics and history. And I was like, oh, I like history. I want to do a degree where I only have a couple hours a day and it's a lot of self-study. So I can just be a student, be a lazy student. That was my juvenile mindset. So I did my history degree and I was coming up to graduation and I really wanted to work in business and finance. So I did this. I stayed on, I did an MBA in finance. And then I went into the finance world. And I always assumed that both degrees were kind of useless. My finance degree was useless because everything I learned when I was trading, I learned after I graduated. And my history degree was useless because I'm not a history professor and I didn't learn anything from it. And it was only recently I realized that actually I learned so much from that history degree, just how to think. And the one thing I remember, I would get flashbacks to some of my professors that would tell me everything in life is about sources. And that's one thing we've really seen in the last few years is just how many lies has been propagated by legacy media. And this election was so interesting because there was two candidates running, but for me, it felt like it was between an establishment and the people, kind of against the establishment. And so I feel like we've lived through this such an interesting, unique few years. And my history degree has helped me way more than anything else. And at the time, I thought it was useless. So I just think the study of history is so important.
I couldn't agree with you more. If you're looking at 1,000 years of history or even 500, the same mistakes, the same issues that we see today have already occurred in one form or the other. So you look at those and you learn from them and you don't make those mistakes. If you don't have that perspective, if you don't study history, you're bound to make the same mistakes over and over again that people have made for thousands of years. And we live in, those of us in the Western world are fortunate to be in a democratic society. That's really kind of rare. They tried it in Greece. They maybe tried it in Rome. It didn't work. So we're living now in the last, say, 300, 200 years in kind of a golden age, and we don't even know it. We don't even know it. But I totally agree with you, the way you think with history. And I was very fortunate that I went to law school, because law school also taught a theoretical, kind of practical way of analyzing and speaking, and not afraid of being confrontational, because when you're confrontational, like in jiujitsu, you learn. It's a good thing. I mean, don't be afraid of conflict. That's crazy to be afraid of conflict. So I have a daughter who is about to go to college, and she's going to study history, and she's even more passionate about it than you or I. So it's my passion. I'm really glad you share it too, because it's very important.
Yeah. So your first two books are about the Vietnam War and the heroes and some of the stories. How did you get so passionate about Vietnam? Because that's the one thing about history is you can spend a lifetime studying, I can spend a lifetime studying, and we could almost never cross, because there's so many different areas of the world. There's so many different areas of, the last few thousand years. So how do you find niches and specialties that you're interested in?
Well, it came natural for me. Like I said, I'm a history guy, always fascinated by World War II, all of the stories, grew up on all of the World War II movies. In the 1990s and 2000s, I think we as a society, Great Britain, France, and the United States did a great job of honoring our World War II heroes, because they were passing. Yes. And they basically saved the world from horrible dictatorship. But then I grew up during the Vietnam War. I was too young to serve, but not by very much. But in 1975, when it ended, I was 13. So 5 more years of it, I could have been involved. And I saw what happened. I saw how our veterans in the United States were not treated well, called baby killers, tomatoes thrown at them. We ultimately withdrew in North Vietnam, took over South Vietnam. It was a war that we all wanted to forget. There are some movies about it with kind of a political slant, but I thought, and I did some research, because originally I thought a World War II book, there's still some veterans around, but I saw nothing on the Vietnam War, very, very little from the men that fought it, where you can see scores of books, rightly so, about World War II. And I said, we have a gap in the historical record of men that will not be with us in 5 to 10 years. And when they die, their story dies with them, and it's gone. And that's actually turned out to be true. I conducted interviews for both of these books in the early 2000s, and many of them have passed away from cancer, Agent Orange related deaths. And if I had not talked to them and got their story dies with them. And the men that fought in Vietnam were the sons of those who fought in World War II. And for the most part, especially those volunteers, went to fight for the same reasons that their fathers fought Hitler and Tojo's Japan, to fight for democracy. In this case, it was to fight communism. So their motives of these 18, 19-year-old men were pure, but their story hasn't been told. And now that they're in their mid-70s, we're losing them, as I've already said. So it's time to honor them. It's time to honor our Vietnam generation, our Vietnam veterans here in the United States to go say thank you to them because we're losing them. And so to your point, it was almost a call to action. I saw we've got a gap here, and maybe I could write 2 books from the story of these men that would at least preserve some of that heroism and gallantry and sacrifice and camaraderie, amazing qualities that should always be lauded in our country.
Yeah, when I was thinking about this conversation last night, one thing I wanted to bring up, and you kind of touched on it, was because of the way it ended. I feel like the Vietnam era was kind of a lot of the sentiment shifted from the start of the war to the end of the war. From what I understand, it's not my specialty. So because it was, I guess there's 2 different stories. One, you can say, well, there was a lot of atrocities that happened. And I know I went to Cambodia and there was a lot of, when the planes came back, they just dropped a lot of bombs there and they're still dealing with that today. It's so tragic. So you can say the bureaucracy overstepped and probably shouldn't have sent those young men to war. But on the same side, those young men who did incredible things that you're documenting, that the stories of heroism and bravery, that can be complete, even in an unjust, I'm saying we can look at it now with a changing perspective and say, yeah, maybe it wasn't the best conflict to get involved in, but that doesn't negate all the acts of heroism from the individual men in the war. Does that make sense? Kind of like how...
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt that our government and bureaucracy made many mistakes. There were, frankly, cover-ups at a high level to continue this conflict, knowing that it was unwinnable. And there's nothing worse to me than you telling a young man to go fight for your country when everything's messed up at a high level.
Yes.
And just a quick example, my book, Swift Sword, it's one day in September of 1967. One example, those men were issued faulty M16s, meaning that the guns would jam. So obviously an M16 is an automatic rifle. If you're being overwhelmed by a enemy attack, you need to rely on that weapon to, if you're outnumbered 5-1, to save yourself and your comrades. This M16 would jam, and the men in a firefight would have to get a cleaning rod, put it together if it wasn't already together, shove it down the end of the rifle to knock out the jammed cartridge, fire again, only to have it jam again and repeat. Well, that cost thousands of lives. And some of the men that I talked about said we might have been in the Revolutionary War with a Brown Bess or a Kentucky long rifle, one shot, because our weapons were faulty. So that's just one example of poor leadership and why this story of Vietnam is so important to not make those mistakes again. I mean, and that's just one example where we're asking these young men and women too, the nurses. And I do want to point out the nurses and doctors in Vietnam saved countless lives, being able to be choppered out and getting to a hospital ship. But another example, individual replacement system. So if, Lawrence, we call you up and we stick you in a unit in Vietnam, everybody else is a veteran. You're there because one of their buddies got killed or wounded. You don't know what they know, so they shun you because you'll get them killed, they think, by making a mistake. And so how are you? You're 18. You don't even have the right equipment. Nobody's talking to you, and you're expected to go fight a war. That doesn't happen anymore. In World War II, units were trained together, led together, went over, this is the United States, fought together, and when they came off the front line, came off together to absorb their replacements. That didn't happen in Vietnam, this individual replacement system. Another mistake, the commander on Operation Swift that first day was a lieutenant with combat experience. That was rare to have the commander of a company have combat experience. And this was a major combat. His 3 platoon leaders were fresh from the United States out of boot camp. They had no combat experience. He never trained with them. He didn't even really know them. But what's a miracle about this story is despite all of these obstacles, and there are more, these men came together, heroism, fighting for the buddy next to them, and they prevailed after a great cost. And incredible, they were basically ambushed by overwhelming North Vietnamese, but they survived. So let's not make the same mistakes we made before in history. Let's do it right. If we're going to ask our young men and women to fight, let's do it right, equip them right, and lead them right.
Yes. Couldn't have said it better. So there's one thing, I have a really good friend and he's incredibly smart. And we always argue, we have profoundly different view on the idea that Hitler might have been stopped earlier if Churchill had not been trying to appease him, like I think it was Chamberlain, prime minister before it even. And he always uses that example. And I'm a bit more of a isolationist mentality where I think if you look at the Gulf Wars, it doesn't seem like you're taking out one bad leader only to have, you take out Saddam Hussein and then ISIS rises up. Or it seems like those areas, it's so, when I listen to podcasts with people that have served there, they say these crazy stories, like some of the warlords parade around all these young boys that they rape. And just, he's like, you can't understand that world. That world is so different to our world. By trying to go in there and meddling, it only makes things worse. So they're kind of two fundamentally different views on the role of the United States, right? How much should we be meddling in other countries and trying to spread democracy versus how much should we just focus on ourselves? Do you have any views on that? 'Cause I don't think there's a right answer. I think it's a fascinating question. And it seems like with this election and with Trump running on the platform of, I want to get out of these forever wars, it seems like the pendulum is shifting to a bit more of an isolationist approach for the US.
Well, my view is this, and I think this comes from the art of war. And this is something we did not do in Vietnam. Know your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Know your enemy. Ho Chi Minh in the 50s sent a letter to the United States government wanting to partner in some ways before he became, quote, a communist. Communism, and when he turned to China and the Soviet Union, was really kind of his second choice because he was after independence for Vietnam. So that was a mistake made by the West, the United States in particular, way back in the 50s, because we didn't know our enemy. We didn't know what was motivating the Vietnamese people. We viewed it more just communism versus non-communism. Well, it was deeper. It's more complex than that. With regard to the Middle East and all these other conflicts, I don't personally, I think going isolationist is wrong. I think going full multinational might not be right either, with nation building, that sort of thing, because you have to know what you're dealing with and deal accordingly. In the Arab countries we have, Saddam Hussein was more of a dictator. ISIS and Al-Qaeda are more religious-based, Muslim extremists, so their motivations are different. You have to know what is motivating your enemy and then act accordingly. Now, I do believe you can't do anything unless you have strength behind you and willingness to use it. You have to walk softly, carry a big stick. That's what Teddy Roosevelt said. Reagan said, trust but verify. I think he took that from someone else. You have to be strong and you have to be willing to use your resources if needed. But we were in Afghanistan trying to nation build. It didn't work. I think we see a pattern here about how to be wise with what we do and have clear, set, realistic goals based on facts. Your friend is right. We don't know what that world is. In regard to Hitler and invading the Sudetenland and Poland, he was emboldened because he saw a weakened West. So knowing your enemy, Hitler was emboldened. He said, okay, I've got kind of a weak sister over here. I'll just go ahead. What are they going to do? They haven't stopped. And it got out of control. He made a pact with the Soviet Union. They split Poland, and we have what we have. Now, whether Churchill's response, Chamberlain's response, it may have been different from who you're talking about, and there's a lot of calculated risk in this. A lot of guessing and gut, but know your enemy, know what motivates them, then you can respond accordingly.
Absolutely love that. I know we don't have too much time, but I really wanted to ask you about your next book you're working on, Robert Benoist. Can you talk a little bit about him? Because what a story. It's incredible.
I'm real excited to tell you about this. So I wrote my 2 books, complete nonfiction, Vietnam War. It was time to do something else. I love reading history. I love reading historical fiction. So I thought, what if I found a historical, true person, entered his skin and viewed his war from his eyes? Obviously, there's a lot of fiction involved with that. There's a lot of artistic license involved with that. So I did a lot of research and did a lot of looking, and I found this guy, Robert Benoist, who's French. Well, I'm much more familiar with British heroes and American heroes in World War II. Maybe it's a language thing, but I'm reading this story about this Frenchman, and there's a stereotypical about the French not wanting to fight, which is totally untrue, not right. And I read his story and I said, okay, let me get this right. He's a World War I fighter pilot. All right. He survives. Oh, then he becomes a current F1 champion. He's basically the Lewis Hamilton of his day. Oh, then he goes and wins Le Mans in a Bugatti. So 2 different races. All right. And then when he's older, close to 50, when World War II breaks out, he decides to become a special agent with Churchill's special operations executive, meaning we're going to put you behind enemy lines, you're going to blow stuff up and you're going to kill people and hope the Germans don't catch you. So he joins that knowing that everybody in France knows him because he's a celebrity. He's got a very recognizable face. They're like, oh, you're the F1 champion. You're the Le Mans champion. So I said, plus many other fascinating things about his life. I said, all right, here we go. This is the guy, because we span World War I, which I'm fascinated with, fighter pilots in World War I, racing, which I love, all the technological aspects of that during the 20s and 30s. And then, of course, being a secret agent saboteur, Churchill formed the SOE to set Europe ablaze, is what he said. It was a 5th column behind enemy lines. Oh, this guy could have sat out the war. He's 48. He could have sat, drink champagne, and okay, it's over. We're okay. He didn't do that. So I said, this is the guy. So this is going on close to 7 years. Research in France and Great Britain, and then just writing, that creative element that you talked about. What would this look like? What would the smells and tastes and what would you be? So it's very excited that it's finished, very excited that it's almost out there. People that have read it, our beta readers, are very excited as well. So I can't wait.
Well,
hopefully I haven't talked too much about it. It's a lot of fun.
It sounds incredible. And I can't wait to read your work. And I'm going to put a link to your website in the show notes. But if there's any final way, best way to get hold of you that you want to let people know.
Sure. First, my website, doyleglass.com. Reach out to me there. You can purchase the book Swift Sword there at a special price also. Of course, Doyle Glass Author on Facebook, Instagram, and my daughters even helped me with the TikTok account. So I didn't figure that out. They did. So social media, like I said, or just go to doyleglass.com and send me an email. Would love to visit with you. Love history, love creating, love entrepreneurship. It's great.
Well, I'm so glad we connected, and we'll definitely do part 2 soon. And thank you so much, Doyle. Good luck with your surgery and getting back to the jiu-jitsu mats as well.
Thanks, Lawrence. I really appreciate it.